Hi, Ian Roberts and Mastering Composition. So just before we begin the demo, I just wanted to remind you that next week we're going to do a studio tour, what kind of brushes, what kind of paint, the lighting, and so on like that. And so I won't talk about that in this demo, but I will put a list of the colors that I'm using in the order they're on my palette down below. And the image this week is a very low intensity sort of gray greens. And I did a very simple, almost diagram of the image, just the shapes, the edges are crisp, there's no nuance, there's no blending, there's no modulation. And normally I don't do that. I just wanted to do it to demonstrate how a solid structure and a solid design will actually carry your painting with nothing fancy. It's the foundation you want to have before you begin, and that'll really build your confidence as you're painting. So here's the image gridded, and you can see that I'm wanting to pull us down to the left-hand side of the image, and let's have a look. And this is the demo. So chrome oxide green, ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, and I'm mixing the first green, some yellow, a little bit of white. I'm mixing the first green. It's quite dull, sort of neutral. It was a little bit too cool there, now it's warm, and there's the first green. Simplest color I could sort of think of against the toned canvas. You'll see actually a couple of times the sun comes in and out on the skylight and it gets warm and cool. So let's just halt there for a sec. That light going on and off like that is sunlight, and that would be almost a deal breaker for me in terms of painting normally. The skylights in the studio, I'll show you next week, are north facing, so the light is really consistent. It's just that, and I've never seen this happen before, I painted that particularly late in the day, and I guess at this time of year the light is bouncing off the building right next to us in like that through the north facing window, so we're getting really warm and cool light as the shadows are going, but as the clouds are going by. But I've never noticed it before. And if it were going on all the time, I don't know how I would paint. I mean, you really need a consistency of light source. That one thing is important. Now this is sort of going for the shadow, and I put it in and I realized not enough. So Dioxazine Purple, Ultramarine Blue, get a little darker so I get a good contrast there. And this is pretty much the same green over on the other side. It's a linen oil primed canvas. You can see it's toned, and you can see my drawing, the grid of thirds in order to get my drawing accurate. I mean, I sort of need that to sort of make sure that I've got the shapes the way I want. And this is for the dark bushes. So you can see I've got Alizarin and Phthalo Green right there, and need to make it warm, get some yellow in it, but those are the dark bushes back there. Sort of two simple shapes. And now I didn't clean the brush. I just have that dark color in there, chrome oxide green, some lighter yellows, in order to create a second green up there. It's not radically different, but it's a little cleaner color. But I didn't even clean the brush. I just added it, and I'm doing the same here. So we're getting a different green, a little bit bluer. There was some blue in it because I want that to sit behind that particular one. But I still didn't clean the brush. I'm just adding paint to that original green that I had. Now I'm taking a color even more blue because I want to sort of create some trees way back, sort of get a sense that they're pushing back so that they're quite a bit of blue in them. I mean, not like distant hills, but just in behind what we're looking at here. So now we have ultramarine blue and cad orange and white and yellow ochre, and we're getting the concrete color. We're starting to put in the concrete. So that's sort of the foundation for that one. So that's the first shape in there, just blocking in the whole thing, stairs and the whole side there, just as one simple shape. And then I'll pretty much have the same color, just a little bit more blue in it. I'm just mixing it again, same basic colors, just mixing it again. It's just a little bit different. And that's the same color, just dragged across there, over on the other side, all the way along the edge of the water. And then I mix the colors pretty much the same, really. I'm just adding a little bit of white, sort of make it a little warmer for the sidewalk as it goes up there. And it needed to be a little lighter, just a little bit of white, flicked it up. And then that's that light, just the darker gray, but just putting it in there. But it's not black and white paint. I mean, they're all mixed, and every time I mix it, it's just a little different. This is the watercolor, and you can see the watercolor, not the watercolor. And I put some orange in it because I just want it to be more like dirty reflection down there. You can see the sun come in and out again. But that color, and just you can see there's other paint still on my brush that came in there a little bit lighter. And then this color here is sort of a duller green that's going to be the reflection of the grays in the water right there. So you can see I'm sort of lifting it. It's a very standard palette that just has these, like the greens and the blues and the yellow ochres, and that's just the two grasses. You'll see this color I'll use on both sides of the concrete to sort of put in that shape. But it's amazing the variety you can get with just a few colors that just keep giving us enough variety in order to make this whole thing work. Then these are for the concrete sort of pieces in the foreground next to the water by the grass. So there's one there that's just one simple shape. Don't have to get too complicated. And then the second one I wanted a little bit darker because it's against the water there. Just a simple shape. So this is a darker gray that's going to be the reflection of the stone ledge all along the water. And you can see I look over at the photograph there now. How far does that go? But you can see it's just very clearly brush mark by brush mark adding the whole thing up. And here I'm getting the color that's alizarin and phthalo green, and then I warm it up with orange and yellow ochre so it's not too black and cold, but that's for the lock itself. But just a simple shape, right? Now last week or 2 weeks ago when I did that junkyard, I sort of did in large areas and painted in and around it. This one is very much just shape by shape by shape, and it sort of shows you two different ways of painting. And this is the grasses at the back, or the not grasses at the back, the dead stuff. And you see I've got a lot of orange and red in that, and I've got a color that I didn't think was quite intense enough, and then I've made it more intense with some orange and red in it. Just that simple shape. And you'll see in the end I realize it's way too intense for the painting, not perhaps for a different painting, but for this painting. And this is the bright bushes on the far right hand side there. Just this one simple shape, quite a different green, more intense than in the photograph. But and then this is getting into the foreground, just a big mass of paint. And you'll see that I sort of scrub it in here, and it's working. You can sort of see the brush work remains because of the nature of the oil primed canvas. Your brushwork kind of stays on the surface in a way, and you get that kind of brushy look to it. But I'm getting it darker as I go down, and you'll see I'll mix another color here and do the same so that I'm kind of gradating it from foreground up into the shape. So it kind of pushes you up into the lit part next to the lock itself. And then there's just a few places where there's some touches of light, or some few touches of shadow and bits and pieces in the grasses. And then there's the shadows there, and then that really hard edge I have to come back and just flick it off because just kind of get rid of it, it's too much. And then there's some sky holes that I'm putting back into that section. You don't want them too bright. You don't want them holding too much attention. But it just sort of, just a few touches, just a few like that. You don't want them too bright, and they do the job, you know. And then there's these darker kind of stains coming down the wall. Just kind of dragged in there. And there'll be the real darks along the bottom. That gets quite dark kind of green. I'll go darker yet because I think it's not quite strong enough, that color yet. And then there's a really hard edge, dark, right along the edge of the water there, which gives us a sense of, oh, that's where the water is. I'll go in darker later as it happens. And then I've put the sky in on the other side, just sort of a gray-green color, kind of gray-green, like it's overcast the way the whole day feels, and this color the same. make it a little darker down there. Just kind of gradate it down at the bottom. And then, again, I'm just getting the reflection of those edges there, getting a little bit more interest in the water. And here's that really dark edge. In the end, I overpainted that before, and then now I've really gone in there with the dark just to make sure that we know where that edge is, and going in with a little bit darker paint just for that. So you can there's the reflections of those greens, the reflections. I'm not showing the mixing anymore because I'm pretty much just pulling paint straight off the canvas or off the palette that's already mixed. So I'm just kind of dragging what I see above down below, and just putting in a bit of an edge here so that it doesn't seem quite so harsh, getting the sense that there's reflections and the edge of the water is kind of shimmering a little bit. And now compared to that one that I showed you at the beginning, now it's all about edges. What are you doing to the edges to kind of integrate them and make them feel more natural? This is dulling a dull color to sort of get that red in the reflection. I didn't want it as intense, but now look at how red that thing is, and you realize, oh boy, that needs to come down. Do you see how it just grips all the attention of what's happening? And so you'll see that I'll just kill that down. But again, these are the edges, of the reflection, just sort of getting those bushes coming up from above, coming down below. I need to adjust them a little bit, but just getting that sort of liquid sense of sort of vertical reflection, and then obviously the edge there, and then these are the stairs, or at least the two sides to the stairs. I put them in on the other side too and took them out because they just seemed too busy. And then I wanted some more intense green just to kind of come up at the top edge of that whole thing, particularly right there where it is sort of the center of interest and where I really want you to look. And then I'm just putting in a couple of things there. And you'll see that I'm putting in the stairs, but I'm not like, oh, are all the stairs right? It's just good enough, and on we go. And now I'm starting to kick that red back because it's just way too intense. And you'll see now it just doesn't hold so much attention. So our attention can just drift over to the left where I want it to go. And then I wanted to clean up that shape so that it looked further away just by having it simpler. And I took those stairs out. They didn't seem to be helping particularly. And just sort of, you can see me sort of adjusting some edges there to try to make it work. Since this is really where I want you to look, up into here, I'm sort of putting some attention up into that. And then, just adjusting the edges, adding a little bit more drama there, right where I want you to look. And just sort of orchestrating the edges so that this is obviously where your attention is going to go. And I'll be, there's a green that I'm sort of exaggerating there a little bit, sort of in two shapes because it was pretty dull. And I mix up a green and put it right into that red shape. So it's holding even less attention, right? Because it kind of ties into the green next to it. And then we've really let that one go. And then there's some grasses, that real edges there against the dark. A couple of bushes that were a little too light. And there we go. And there's the finished painting. And you can see just that orchestration to lead you to the top left. And then you're sort of released to look around different parts of the painting, but you just keep getting impelled back to that lock. And the sky now is sort of integrated into it. That diagram I had at the beginning, the sky was much too dramatic and held too much attention. But now you can see the whole thing integrated and working as a whole. So next week we have the studio tour. Please do like this video if you enjoyed it. Please do subscribe, and I will see you on Tuesday. Bye for now.